There is a woman in Kyoto who, every evening at exactly 9 o'clock, turns off her phone completely. Not silences it, not flips it face down, turns it off, sets it in a small ceramic dish by the door, and leaves it there until morning. She fills a slim iron kettle and sets it on the stove, and while the water heats, she does not scroll, does not check one last message, does not fill the 2 or 3 minutes with anything at all. She sits at a low wooden table, hands loosely in her lap, and listens to the kettle begin to tick as it warms. By 9:30, her tea is poured, and her small kitchen counter has been wiped down to bare wood. By 10, she has spoken a single quiet sentence to no one in particular, something close to gratitude, and by 10:15, she is asleep, and she stays asleep, the way people describe sleeping as children, before any of this needed a name. And somewhere across the world, someone is doing everything a wellness article told them to do. Magnesium supplement, taken on schedule, blackout curtains, properly installed, a sleep tracking app on the nightstand, logging every restless hour in a color-coded chart, phone across the room, allegedly, though it somehow ends up back in their hand around 11. And still, at midnight, they are lying flat on their back staring at a dark ceiling, mind looping through tomorrow's first meeting, last week's unresolved argument, a stray comment from a coworker 3 days ago that shouldn't still matter and somehow does. They did the checklist. They did all of it, and the checklist did not work. What if the difference between these two people has almost nothing to do with what either of them removes from the bedroom, and everything to do with what happens in the 90 minutes before they ever get there? Researchers who study sleep and stress have pointed out for years that the nervous system does not wind down on command, the way a light switches off the instant you flip it. It needs a sequence, a series of small, repeated cues that tell the body, unambiguously, that the day is actually finished. In Japan, many homes still carry something like this, without ever calling it a system, a short chain of small evening rituals that close the day on purpose, one deliberate motion at a time. In the West, we tend to skip straight from busy to horizontal, and then wonder, genuinely confused, why the transition never quite lands. By the end of this video, you will have all 7 of these habits, small enough to start tonight, in something close to the order many Japanese evenings still move through without thinking twice about it. But stay until the 7th one. It's the quietest of the 7. It asks for almost nothing, and it's the one almost everyone accidentally skips, which is exactly why it's the one that actually finishes the night. Here is the belief we need to take apart before any of the 7 will make sense. Most of us treat rest as something that arrives. You finish your last task, you fall onto the couch or the mattress, and calm is supposed to show up on its own, quietly, like a light switching off somewhere behind your eyes. That is the equation almost everyone in the West is running, whether they'd put it in words or not. Work stops, therefore rest starts. It sounds reasonable. It is also, on the evidence of a lot of very tired people, simply wrong. Rest is not something you fall into at the end of a day. It's something you build, in stages, the same way every evening, on purpose, not by accident, and not by exhaustion finally winning the argument. Think about how often stopping and resting quietly get treated as the same thing. You close the laptop, and that's supposed to count. You put the phone down at 11, and that's supposed to count. But stopping is only the absence of doing something. It is not, on its own, the presence of calm. A car with its engine still running, and its wheels no longer turning, has stopped moving. It has not, in any real sense, rested. Most evenings end exactly this way. Motion simply ceases, somewhere around midnight, out of sheer tiredness, and we call whatever's left over rest, for lack of a better word. An evening built from small, deliberate closing rituals produces something genuinely different from an evening that simply runs out of momentum. That difference is what the next several minutes are actually about. Here's the mechanism sitting underneath all 7 of tonight's habits. An evening with no closing ritual isn't actually a restful evening. It's an unfinished one. Your brain does not automatically know the difference between "I am done for the day" and "I simply stopped doing things for the day," unless something specifically tells it so. Without that signal, the mind keeps running the day's unfinished business long after the body has gone still, a state researchers sometimes describe as cognitive arousal, the mental engine still idling in the driveway long after everyone's gone inside. Japan's evening habits were never really about the tea, or the tidying, or the sitting in silence, taken on their own. They function as a sequence of small, deliberate closing signals, one after another, each one telling the nervous system, "This part of the day is now over." Let's walk through what that sequence actually looks like, one habit at a time. Number 1. Ma. In Japanese design and aesthetics, ma, the character carries the sense of gap or interval, refers to the deliberate empty space between two things, the pause held between two notes in traditional music, the blank space left unfilled in a painting or a garden, the silence allowed to sit between two people mid-conversation. It is treated as a real, intentional element in its own right, not as an absence of something better. Most Western evenings contain no ma at all. The instant one input ends, the episode, the scroll, the podcast in the earbuds, another begins before the mind has had even a few seconds to register that the last one actually finished. There is never a gap, so there is never a moment where the brain is asked to simply sit with nothing. Tonight, build one on purpose. Choose a fixed 10-minute window, somewhere before your normal wind-down begins, and put nothing at all into it. No phone, no show, no podcast, and, this is the part people resist, not even meditation or a task disguised as rest. Just 10 empty minutes, sitting or lying somewhere quiet, doing nothing you could describe to someone else afterward. It will feel strange for the first 2 nights. Some people report a kind of low-grade restlessness, almost an itch to reach for something. That's not a sign it isn't working. That's the actual gap doing its job, teaching your evening, for the first time in a long time, that empty space is allowed to exist without being filled. In traditional Japanese rooms, ma shows up architecturally too. A single alcove left deliberately bare, except for one scroll or one branch, because a room that holds nothing but objects has nowhere left for the eye, or the mind, to rest. Your 10 minutes tonight are the same principle, just applied to time instead of a room. Number 2. Danshari. The word is built from 3 separate characters, meaning, roughly, refuse, dispose, and separate. A philosophy of consciously releasing what no longer serves you, most often applied to physical belongings and clutter, though people who practice it describe it spilling into how they think about time and commitments too. Most people save their tidying for a weekend deep clean that gets pushed back, week after week, until the mess simply becomes part of the room's permanent scenery. A cluttered counter, or an overflowing entryway, becomes a small, constant, low-level visual reminder of things left undone. And things left undone are precisely what keeps a mind occupied at 11 at night, circling back to a to-do list it can't quite silence. The nightly version of Danshari is not a deep clean. It is one shelf, one counter, one small and specific surface, reset in under 2 minutes, every single evening, right before you sit down for the night. Clear the kitchen counter completely. Straighten the shoes by the entryway. Put 3 stray things back exactly where they belong. Look around your room right now. As you're listening to this, is there one surface you already know needs this tonight? one you've been quietly ignoring for days. That's the one to start with, tonight, before you do anything else on this list. Practitioners of Danshari often describe the 2-minute version as more effective than the weekend deep clean anyway, precisely because it never has time to become a dreaded chore. It's small enough to actually happen, night after night, instead of being postponed into a Saturday that keeps disappearing. Number 3. Naikan. The word translates roughly to inner looking, and it comes from a structured method of self-reflection developed in Japan in the 20th century, still used today in various therapeutic, educational, and even corporate settings. Traditional Naikan poses 3 specific questions about a relationship or a stretch of time. What did I receive? What did I give? And what trouble did I cause? Most Western reflection, when it happens at all, tends to spiral quickly into replaying what went wrong that day, which isn't really reflection, it's rumination, and rumination is one of the single biggest drivers of a mind that refuses to switch off once the lights are out. The evening-sized version of Naikan keeps it small. Before bed, silently or in a few lines in a notebook, answer just the first 2 questions about your day. What did I receive today? What did I give today? Nothing about fault, nothing about what you failed to do. Slow down here. Let this land. A mind that closes the day by quietly cataloging what it received sleeps in a genuinely different way than one that closes it by replaying, for the 40th time, what it regrets. It doesn't need to be large. A coworker who covered for you, a stranger who held a door, the specific taste of the coffee you drank at 7 this morning. Naikan doesn't ask you to find something extraordinary, only to actually notice what was ordinary. That single shift, from replaying to noticing, is most of the habit. Number 4. Ichigo Ichie. The phrase translates to one time, one meeting, a concept rooted in the Japanese tea ceremony. The understanding that this exact gathering, with these exact people, in this exact configuration, will never occur again in quite the same way, and so it deserves your complete attention while it's actually here. Most evening meals in the West happen with a phone resting on the table and a screen in the next room already quietly calling. Ichigo Ichie, applied to an ordinary weeknight, is simple. Choose one part of your evening, dinner, tea, 10 unhurried minutes with a partner, a child, or even a pet, and give it your full, undivided attention, phone elsewhere in the house, nothing else competing for it. Not because every evening is precious in some grand, ceremonial sense, but because a mind that practices complete attention even once a day, on purpose, gets measurably better at settling down when it finally needs to, later that same night. The tea ceremony this idea comes from can take hours to prepare. For a gathering that might last 20 minutes, every movement deliberate, precisely because the host knows this specific afternoon, with these specific guests, will genuinely never happen again in exactly this way. Your version tonight doesn't need the ceremony. It only needs the same brief, undivided noticing that this particular dinner, this particular conversation, is likewise happening exactly once. Number 5. Shinrin-yoku. The term translates literally to forest bathing, and it describes a practice studied for decades by researchers in Japan and increasingly elsewhere, involving unhurried time spent among trees, engaging the senses directly rather than the analytical mind. A full session of forest bathing takes hours. Most people simply don't have on a Tuesday night. The tonight-sized version takes about 2 minutes. Step outside. A balcony, a doorway, a patch of grass. It doesn't need to be a forest. Feel the actual temperature of the air against your skin, not the temperature the weather app told you it would be. Notice one specific sound you can't immediately identify. That's the entire habit. 2 minutes spent inside your senses instead of your thoughts. And your thoughts, if you're honest, are exactly what has been running the show. uninterrupted, since the moment you woke up this morning. Some studies out of Japan on forest bathing have measured lower cortisol and steadier heart rate variability after even brief time spent this way outdoors, though researchers are careful to note the exposure in those studies is typically longer than 2 minutes. Treat tonight's version as the smallest possible dose of the same idea, not a substitute for it, a quiet nightly reminder that your senses exist, separate from your inbox. Number 6. Kotodama. The word means, roughly, word spirit, an old belief, still referenced in Japanese language and culture today, that words themselves carry a kind of power, that speaking something aloud makes it more real, more settled, than simply thinking it privately. You don't need to believe this literally for it to work practically. Most people's last thoughts before sleep are unspoken and unfinished, a mental list still quietly running in the background, never actually voiced, never actually closed. Speaking one line aloud, even quietly, appears to function differently in the mind than merely thinking the same words does. So say one sentence of gratitude out loud tonight, however small, right before you turn off the light. Not written down, not just thought, spoken, even if it's only to the empty room. Thank you for today is enough. The old belief held that the words themselves carry weight once they're spoken. Whether or not that's literally true in some measurable sense, saying them out loud still seems to close something that thinking them silently simply does not. It costs nothing. It takes 4 seconds, and it's the easiest of tonight's 7 habits to forget, precisely because it feels almost too small to matter, which is usually a decent sign that it does. And number 7, the one I ask you to wait for, Yoin. The word describes the lingering resonance that remains after something ends, the way a temple bell's tone keeps hanging faintly in the air long after the strike itself has stopped, or the quiet aftertaste that remains once a cup of good tea has actually been finished. It's a concept drawn from Japanese aesthetics that specifically values what continues after the main event, not merely the event itself while it's happening. Here is what almost everyone does instead, every single night, without ever quite noticing they're doing it. The show ends, and immediately the phone comes back out. The conversation winds down, and immediately a new video starts loading, before the last one has even finished settling. There is essentially no yoin left in most modern evenings, no space allowed for the last feeling of the day to actually finish resonating, because something new always rushes in to cut it off first. The 7th habit is simply this: after the very last thing you do tonight, the tea, the spoken thanks, the conversation, whatever it happens to be, sit for 60 seconds and let it finish. Don't reach for anything else. Let the last feeling of the day ring out, the way a temple bell is allowed to fade on its own, without anyone reaching out to silence it early. This is the one almost everyone skips, because it asks for nothing except the willingness not to immediately reach for the next thing. And it is, quietly, the one that actually tells your mind the day is over. In the tea ceremony this word comes from, the guests are taught to sit in the silence after the last cup is finished, rather than rising immediately. The resonance of the gathering is considered part of the gathering itself, not an afterthought to be rushed past. 60 seconds, tonight, is your version of the same courtesy, extended to your own day. All 7 of these look, on the surface, like 7 completely different rituals: tea, tidying, a pair of questions, undivided attention, 2 minutes of night air, a spoken sentence, 60 seconds of silence. They are not 7 separate habits. They are one idea, worn 7 different ways. Close the day on purpose, in deliberate stages, instead of letting it trail off, unfinished, into whatever screen happens to be closest. The Western instinct, when rest doesn't come easily, is almost always to add something: another app, another supplement, another elaborate routine, bought in a box with a 5-star rating. The quieter Japanese instinct, running through all 7 of tonight's habits, is to remove instead. Remove the extra input, the unfinished clutter on the counter, the unspoken thought still circling, the next thing that keeps cutting off the last thing before it's had a chance to fade. And what's left underneath, once all of that is gone, was never something you needed to add. It was there the whole time, underneath the noise, waiting on the other side of one gap, one clean shelf, 2 honest questions, 1 dinner with a phone put away, 2 minutes of actual air, 4 spoken words, and 60 seconds of letting the day simply finish ringing. The woman in Kyoto is asleep now. Her kettle has been rinsed and set back on its shelf. Her phone stays face down and off in its small ceramic dish by the door until morning light finds the room. The apartment is dark and quiet and, in a very specific sense, finished, because she closed it, on purpose, in the same 7 small ways, the same way she does almost every single night of her life. None of these 7 habits require new equipment, an app, or a subscription. That's not an accident. It's the whole point. The West's version of fixing a bad night's sleep almost always involves buying something. Japan's version, worn quietly into these 7 small rituals, involves doing one small thing on purpose, in the same order, until the body stops needing convincing that the day is actually finished. If you're going to start with just one of these tonight, tell me which number in the comments. The 10-minute pause, the 1 shelf reset, the 2 quiet questions, the full attention at dinner, the 2 minutes outside, the spoken thanks, or the 60 seconds of silence at the very end. And share this with the one person you know who is doing absolutely everything right on paper, the supplements, the app, the blackout curtains, and still can't seem to actually sleep. They don't need one more app. They need an ending, built on purpose, the same way, every single night. This channel shares cultural ideas and perspectives for reflection, not professional medical, mental health,